Lakers point guard Rajon Rondo is expected to be out 6 to 8 weeks after suffering a fracture to his right thumb that's ultimately requiring surgery to repair. Welcome back, everyone. I'm Dr. Brian Sutterer, and this is your #1 source for learning about everything related to sports injuries and sports medicine news. This is the first injury since the NBA season resumed, and so in this video, we're going to take a look at some basics of thumb fractures. Make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date with any NBA injury news, and also go check out my Twitter page for more real-time breakdown and injury analysis. And we don't have footage of the injury itself, but let's jump right to our anatomy and start talking about thumb fractures. Within our hand, the bones in the wrist are referred to as the carpal bones. You then have the metacarpal bones that sit more in the palm, and then you have the phalanges, which are the bones in the fingers. Most of our fingers have a proximal, a middle, and a distal phalanx, but the thumb is unique in that it only has a proximal and a distal phalanx. The joint where the thumb articulates with the wrist is called the first carpal metacarpal joint, or CMC joint, and it articulates with a specific bone called the trapezium. The majority of fractures to the thumb occur at the base of the thumb, where this CMC joint is located. With these thumb-based fractures, there's two uniquely named fractures that you might hear about in the future called a Bennett fracture and a Rondo fracture. A Bennett fracture is partially intra-articular, meaning inside the joint, but there's typically just this one fracture line, as opposed to a Rondo fracture usually is in sort of a T or a Y-shaped pattern and is completely intra-articular, which makes it a more severe fracture. You can also have fractures of the thumb base, though, that don't involve the actual joint itself. These thumb-based fractures typically occur when somebody lands, applying some axial compression through a thumb that's flexed, or some forced abduction of the thumb. If we look at our hand like this, abduction is going to be when the thumb comes straight up, and adduction is going to be when the thumb comes back down. So you imagine when somebody's falling and their thumb is abducted up, that's going to put more pressure through that joint. Also, thumb flexion is when the thumb is kind of brought more across, so also applying some compressive force this way could lead to this fracture. Most likely what happened here is Rondo had a fall, and just the way he landed on his right hand is what caused that fracture. The decision to operate on these typically depends on the severity of displacement or how much the bones are out of normal position whenever they look at imaging studies. You can either do an open reduction with internal fixation, where you make an incision on the skin and put some sort of fixating plate or device down onto the bones to get everything back in proper position. You can also do closed reduction, meaning there's no surgical incision, and you basically put wires or pins in through the skin to hold that bone position in place. Think about what Steph Curry had done, where he talked about having some pins in his hand that had to be removed in a subsequent surgery. The biggest long-term risk is that if the fracture is intra-articular, meaning it involves some component of that thumb-based joint, you have to potentially worry about long-term chances of arthritis within that joint. When you have a fracture that has to be corrected, you're changing the balance of the forces through that joint, and that first CMC or thumb-based joint is already very susceptible to getting osteoarthritis or wear and tear arthritis. Rondo, of course, broke that thumb a number of years ago, but was able to recover just by putting on a cast and didn't have to have surgery. I think one of the big things with his recovery and return to the Lakers, though, is going to be what he'll have to go through with a quarantine process when he is healed and recovered. Of course, since this is just his hand, Rondo will still be able to do lower body workouts, conditioning, kind of running, weightlifting, and so on. But he, of course, isn't going to be able to do anything with that hand because he's going to be in some sort of fixed splint or cast, keeping everything in place. Of course, then when he returns, he'll have to go through all of the quarantine and isolation protocols to get back into the bubble. So again, based on time course, I'd suspect the earliest we'd see him back would be the conference finals or the NBA finals if the Lakers make it there. That's it for the video, everybody. Thank you as always for watching. Let me know any questions or comments below. And until next time, we'll see you later. Bye.